Hello, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, here to serve clinical interpretations on hot takes on all things Bravo and pop culture. Today's show, I am recording today's show. It is Monday, November 13th, and today is World Kindness Day. So normally I do record on Mondays and then I post the episode on Tuesdays, but I just thought in honor of World Kindness Day, um, I had it would be a good idea for me to share the recent experience that I had. Very, very wild experience. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, your Bish Therapist on Instagram, I posted over the weekend about a experience I had with a gentleman, and then I ended up having to get state police involved and talk him down, and it's a whole story. And because of that, I needed to take the weekend to just kind of decompress, to get off of social media. And so, for those of you who are listeners and followers, thank you so much for your kind words, your support, and most importantly, your understanding. You know, for me, I love doing this, but because I am very sensitive when things happen, sometimes I just need to take a step back to decompress. So thank you for those of you who just gave me a lot of support and space. I appreciate it. But I'm back. So today on World Kindness Day, I wanted to share the experience that happened with this gentleman, to talk a little bit about mental health awareness, decreasing the stigma, how we can really help people, and, you know, just being the light in the world that we want to see. You know, for those of you who are consistent listeners, which thank you, you know that I end my podcast with be the light in the world you want to see and take care of yourselves and each other. And so on World Kindness Day, you know, for me, those sentiments are very, very important. And so with this experience that I had, I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, again, taking the stigma away from mental health issues, how we can best be a good helper to somebody while maintaining our boundaries, because that's really important. A lot of people reached out to me after the incident and said, you know, well, how would you recommend a non-professional handle this? Which I just thought was a really great question. So I'm going to answer all those questions today. Um, Also, one thing I will say before I get started with this, that taking a little break over the weekend allowed me to, I just needed to watch some non-Bravo content. Sometimes, you know, doing this now, I enjoy all those shows, but sometimes it does feel like work. So over the weekend, I watched a non-Bravo show on Netflix called Twin Flame. Oh, wait, what was it called? It was something about Twin Flame Union. Of course, now I'm forgetting the title. But I did just post about this on my Instagram stories. Again, your Bish Therapist on Instagram, YOURBISH. I am my next podcast. So next Monday when I record, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll do a bonus episode depending on, you know, where I'm at. But I encourage everyone who wants to kind of follow along to my podcast, go on Netflix and watch the Twin Flame. It's a 4-part, it's a limited series and there's 4 episodes. I'm going to cover that next week, and I'm going to cover it with my signature hot takes, deep dives, and serving Bish for sure. Because these people, I just, oh my gosh, I can't. So anyone who's interested in, you know, knowing what I'm talking about or even participating in that conversation, I did post about, if you do watch that and you have questions that you would like me to answer or to address, please DM me, or you can email me at yourbishtherapist@gmail.com. And I will give my own analysis and interpretations. And if I get some questions, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, I will certainly answer those. Okay, so now on to the storytelling. So I'm going to tell the story first of what happened to give you guys an understanding of the situation before we, move on to everything else. And before I start the story, I want to reiterate a sociological concept called the bystander effect. And I talked about this in some of my other podcasts. And for those of you who are new listeners, I have 13 episodes of podcasts so far. So anywhere you listen to podcast, if you look up Your Bish Therapist, all those episodes will come up. I get a lot of DMs about people saying, will you cover this? Will you cover that? And a lot of times I have already covered it. Certainly some things require that I continue to cover them. But so I've covered, Southern Charm. I've covered a ton of different Bravo shows, the Randall scandal, all these different things. I have some early episodes too. So go over to my link tree, which is on my Instagram. And it will take you to all the podcasts that I've ever done with Amy, just by myself alone. And with Amy, meaning with Amy Phillips. I started this platform kind of on her show. She gave me a really huge opportunity, the beautiful, talented Amy Phillips. She has a podcast called Drama Darling. And I highly recommend that people go over there and listen to it too. Amy's amazing. So the bystander effect essentially is, when I was taking like sociology 101, because I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Penn State, but I also have a minor in sociology. I was just always fascinated by not only individuals, but also groups of people. And so the bystander effect tells us that if we are in a large group where the more people that are around when somebody needs help, the less likely people are to actually call for help, because we think as humans, oh, well, there's a lot of people around, someone will surely call, and then nobody calls. So what happened to me this weekend, it kind of felt like the bystander effect. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that, and also, to really share about this so that we, the people who are listening to this, make sure that we are never part of the bystander effect. I adore this community. I have the most amazing, empathetic, lovely folks who, listen and watch and follow. And so a lot of people want to know, how do I do better? How do I do things different? Because not saying that you're not already doing these things, but I'm going to help you figure that out. So this all started on last Thursday when I was going to get my haircut. I had not been feeling good because for me, I live in Northeast PA. I've shared this before. It is this time of year where it is dark by 4:30, and it is frigid cold. The lows here are in the 20s and 30s at night, and it will stay this cold until probably March. So for me, when, I do struggle with seasonal affective disorder. So when it is dark and it's cold, my chronic health issues, they feel it and they get really cranky. So I had been feeling really crappy, and, my arthritis was acting up. I had all these issues. And so I was really looking forward to getting my haircut, coming home, and just, self-care. And for me, what self-care looks like is, watching some great shows that don't have anything to do with this podcast, or, I do love Bravo, but it depends on my mood, whatever I'm interested in. I love true crime. I watch a lot of murder shows. I'm fascinated by that. That does seem counterintuitive to self-care, but listen, my brain is complex. What can I say? um, so Also, my idea of self-care is, I have heated lavender wraps. When my arthritis gets bad in my hand, I have like a wax tub that, I can soak my hands in to, the wax kind of helps with arthritis. For those of you who do struggle with arthritis or chronic pain, DM me about that. But I can just tell you, find it on Amazon. Go on Amazon, search wax tub for arthritis or whatever, and it'll just pop up. Super helpful. I recommend that. Again, not getting paid, just trying to be kind and help. So the point is that I was not prepared for the day that I was going to have. So as I was driving to my hair appointment, I saw this gentleman on the side of the road. He looked like he was looking for something, and I saw, and this is important to the story. It was 11 o'clock a.m. And I was driving to my hair appointment, but I saw there was like a car on the side of the road too. So I thought maybe something just came out of his car and he was looking for it. Um, because my problem is that I'm too observant. And I did observe that. And number two is, if normally I would have called 911, but I incorrectly believed that this gentleman was actually just looking for something, and I misread the situation. So I kind of feel guilty about that, but that's a whole other thing. So I get my hair cut. I'm on my way home, which, by the way, so I live in kind of like a rural part of Pennsylvania. I live in Northeast Pennsylvania in a town called Mountaintop. And so here, number one, we don't have a homeless population because it's just too cold. And I mean, I know that there are people that are unhoused in and around the area, but what I'm saying is it's not a big area where that's something that you see consistently, number one. Number two, it's a small area that there's basically like two ways in and out of where I live. I mean, sincerely. And there's a main artery, a main road that I was traveling on. So to be clear about that, because a lot of this seems very confusing, but if you understand the, kind of where I live, the geographical issues, this kind of makes things even more frustrating. So anyway, so I'm driving home from my appointment. It is now 12:30, and I see the same young man walking on the side of the road without any shoes and without proper clothing. And I immediately pulled over. Sometimes for me, when I get into helper mode, it's hard to explain, but I don't consciously think about things. My body just like takes over and I'm just like, must help, must do this. So I pull over and I ask the young man if he needs help, and he says he does. So I get out of the car and I can see that he has a t-shirt on. He has like sort of pajama pants, but like they're not full pants, and he has socks on and no shoes. And it is in the 40s. And it became immediately clear to me that something was not right. And I just I jumped into kind of therapist mode, assessor mode, because I am trained to do that. But I just started asking him some questions, and it became immediately clear to me that this young man was in psychosis. He was in an active psychosis. I could tell because of my training and because of my experience working with folks with schizophrenia and some, psychosis and things like that. I have had experience with that. So I could tell that he was responding to internal and external stimuli, which what that means is that he was having auditory and visual hallucinations that I could immediately identify. And he kept saying he was trying to go to the store, but it was clear that he didn't have any money. He didn't like he did not know. He was not oriented to person, place, and time, which means he wasn't aware of really who he was, where he was. He was very confused. So I stay with him and I have this blanket in the back of my car. And the funny story about this is, so my grandfather, who is 96 years old, by the way, he's still living. He is the light of my life. He is just the love of my life. I adore him so much. My grandfather, since I was, old enough to drive, always taught me to keep a blanket in the back of my car, for winters here, in case you got stuck, in case something happened. And so one year he gave me this blanket, and I have kept it in the back of my car ever since. Never used it. I just always keep it in the in my trunk. So I opened my trunk and I thought, well, this blanket's been sitting back here for how long? This kid needs it more than I do. So let me take the blanket. I, give it to him. It is apparent that he does not want to be touched, which is totally understandable, because when you're really confused, you don't want people in your bubble. And, so I get the blanket on him and I call 911, because it was immediately clear to me that this gentleman needed some psychiatric care and he needed safety. He would have frozen to death, if he was just out walking and things like that. So I call 911, and initially they say to me, we've received numerous calls on this gentleman. He doesn't want help. And this is where I just immediately was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I said, it's not about him wanting help. It's about him needing help. He is not dressed appropriately for the weather. He is not oriented to person, place, and time. I'm a mental health professional, and I need um, police, and I need an ambulance. This person needs assistance, whether he wants it or not. So the great thing about me is I have a very loud mouth, and I am a very fierce advocate. And where that comes from, for those people who are new listeners, I've talked about this on some of my other podcasts, but I have been diagnosed with cancer twice. And both times I was told I was a hypochondriac and I was insane. And then I ended up having cancer twice. And so my loud voice, my unwillingness to be gaslit by the medical community saved my life on 2 occasions. The first occasion did almost kill me, and that's a whole other story. So, the point of what I'm sharing is that when you have a history of institutional trauma in terms of how you've been treated, and then you've had something really terrible happen to you, I tend to be just a really fierce, loud advocate. And, there's a saying that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I just squeak, 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 motherfucker. Part of my language, but it's just, you have to have that kind of badass mentality. So when I said, I told them, I said, you guys need to come. And they said, okay, we're going to be sending people out. So the gentleman wanted to get into my car, which I knew wasn't probably a great idea, because again, helping with boundaries is really important. I was going to stand there and wait with him until ambulances came. But I didn't think it was a good idea for him to get into my car, considering that he was in active psychosis. Because here's the thing, people who are actively experiencing that through no fault of their own, they get scared, they can, become paranoid and delusional. And so I didn't want him to have an issue in my car. So I sat there and I waited with him, and he got frustrated and he just started walking away, which, okay, so fair. What I just did is I just kind of sat and I watched him. At least he had the blanket, so at least he was warm. And I'm waiting, I'm waiting, I'm waiting. And I called 911 again. And I just said, listen, he is now walking on the road, and he was kind of going in and out of traffic. And I said, he's going to get hurt. And the other thing I was really concerned about is he was sitting on people's porches and just kind of sitting there. And here's a not so fun fact about where I live. So I live in an area that they're big on guns, and they're also big on, if you're on my property, I can just shoot you, and that's too bad because you were on my property. So, which I don't subscribe to that belief. And so I was afraid that he was going to go to one of these houses a wrong house and someone was just going to kill him. Because what I also will say is that this young man, he was a person of color, and I live in an area that is racism is extremely high, lack of compassion, lack of empathy. It's, you know, mostly white folks live here. And so there's a lot of these greater issues where I live that you know, I'm smart enough to understand how that's going to potentially impact this young man. And I'm going to keep just saying young man because I'm certainly not going to say his name. I don't want to, you know, I want to maintain his anonymity. That's really important to me. So I call 911 again and I just say, you know, I can't get him to stay with me. He's walking away. He's going to these houses. Someone's going to hurt him. Please, you guys got to get someone here quick. And some more time goes by and I'm, you know, seeing him do all this stuff. And, you know, again, I'm just keeping my eyes on him. I'm not actually following him because the thing is, when someone is in an active psychosis, they can be paranoid and you don't want to worsen that. So the worst thing you can do is, you know, follow someone or touch them if they don't want to be touched or kind of swarm them. It just makes people really scared. You know, also think about, would you like that? So that's the other thing. So I end up calling a third time, and at this point, they're really angry with me. But I don't care. I don't care that they're angry with me. This has been something that's happened my whole life. When you continue to speak up and advocate, people are going to be irritated with you. Guess what? That's a them problem, not a me problem. So I just said to them, I said, well, if you want me to stop calling, you just got to hurry up and get here. You know, what do you want me to do? So finally, police pull up. And what I will say is that I was dealing with Pennsylvania State Police. So where I live in Pennsylvania, there are local police, but then the Pennsylvania State Police in some rural areas, they are the ones to respond where maybe there's not like a local police force. So Pennsylvania State Police respond, ambulances come, and because I'm the one who called, they got my name, they got my information. I said to them, I said, I am a mental health professional. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology. I am licensed in the state of Pennsylvania and I'm a qualified assessor. And here is what I'm telling you. And I shared with them that he needs some mental health treatment. He appears to be in active psychosis. And so the frustrating thing for me that happened was the two male troopers just disregarded me. Which again, I am no stranger to because of the way that I look. You know, I kind of look young-ish and unassuming, even though I'm going to be 43. I look younger than I am. I'm no stranger to people not taking me seriously. And, you know, that's just something that frustrated me because I said to them, I said, I'm telling you, this is the assessment that I'm giving you is accurate. We need to find him, like, get him now. They were trying to say, well, do you think it's drugs? And it's like, well, if it is drugs, it still doesn't matter because he's still in active psychosis. So whether it's drug induced or whether it's mental health induced, the same process has to happen. So got through all that BS. And then I see, you know, I get in my car, I give them all the information, and I start to leave, and I see all these people swarm him, and he got scared. He kind of ran out of his blanket and he ran away. And I just thought, I'm gonna have to get involved. I'm gonna have to, you know what? I'm just gonna have to I'm gonna have to do something about this. So I pull over behind the state police. And here's another thing that I want to interject really quickly is that there are good and bad actors in all professions. Let me be really clear about that. Doctors, nurses, therapists, police officers, first responders. There are amazing folks, and then there are some folks who are not amazing. And that's just how it is in all professions. I have seen and encountered some therapists who it should be a crime for them to practice. So the thing of it is that I am mindful because first responders are so important. And I am not here to denigrate or trash anybody. I'm just here to share my experience. Just to be really clear about that, I support first responders. They have very important, very challenging, very difficult jobs. But there, as I mentioned, there are good and bad actors. Okay. So let me be clear about that. So I pull up behind the Pennsylvania State Police. There were two different officers that I was dealing with. One was amazing and one was not. So I was dealing with the gentleman who was wonderful and amazing, and he listened to me and he heard me and he said, okay, let's follow your lead. He said, um, why don't you drive, like where he ran, where this gentleman ran, it was in like a kind of a suburban like neighborhood. And so he said, let's drive over there. You will follow you and just see what you can do. And I said, okay. Historically, any place that I've ever worked, I have been that person who is the best person to deal with crisis and the best person to deal with people. And I will be honest about that. The reason for that is because I have experienced such pain, and I know what it's like to feel not seen and invalidated. And so because of my pain, I believe that I can really see other people's pain who are really struggling. And so historically, I have just always been that person who's just good at dealing with people in really challenging situations. So this is not new to me. So I eventually find this gentleman. He is in the driveway of someone's house, and he at this point is I can tell that he's scared. So initially you might look at someone like this and think, well, oh, they're violent. No, think about how you might act if like 15 people swarmed you and try to put their hands on you. I think it's just, again, this is part of me taking out the stigma, because people that I've told about the story, they say, well, weren't you scared? And it's like, no, this was the person who was scared. I was just trying to help him. But for me, I just have that awareness. So I just want to be really clear that people with active psychosis, they are very rarely aggressive. They are more scared of you than you are of them. Trust me. So I go to where this gentleman is. I said, hi, it's me, because we kind of had a little rapport. I threw him the blanket because I didn't want to go near him. He took the blanket, he wrapped it back around himself because, again, he's freezing, he's shivering. We can't have this. So throw him back the blanket. And I just spent a couple minutes. I said, listen, you're not in trouble. I'm here to help you. It's cold. You're not really dressed for the weather. You keep saying you want to go to the store. So does that mean you're hungry? And he said he was. And I said, okay, so let's help you get some food. Let's help you get warm. Let's help you get, some of the help that you need. And so it was challenging to talk with him because he was responding to things that he was saying, and I could tell that. So I just kept assuring him that when he seemed really scared, I assured him that he was safe and I was going to help him. And sometimes when people are having a hard time, that's all you can do. So eventually I talked to him. He is willing to look at me. He's willing to talk to me. And then one of the good actors, one of the great officers, he comes up and I said, this is my friend, Officer Blank, and he is going to help us. Okay. So we were able to get him in the back of the police car. They decided not to do an ambulance because they thought maybe that would freak him out a little bit more. And once we got him in the back of the police car, I thought, okay, thank goodness, great. He's safe. He's going to get fed and, with the services that he needs. And then the not so great police officer comes over and says, I'm going to need you to go to the hospital to do a 302. So I'm going to explain this really quick. In each state, there are different names for this. So in the state of Pennsylvania, what a 302 is a 302 is an involuntary hospitalization. So a 201 is if you're voluntarily hospitalizing yourself due to a mental health crisis. But if you're not willing to, then a 302 has to be petitioned. And I've done tons of these throughout my career. It's you fill out a bunch of paperwork that says, what did you observe, concerns for the person, et cetera, et cetera. Now, here's the important thing to note. Anyone can petition a 302. It certainly does not have to be a therapist, because if it did, nobody, it wouldn't happen as much, because guess what? Therapists can't be everywhere. And unfortunately, in the state of Pennsylvania, the mental health system is super broken. So there are other places where if something like this happened, a mental health team would come out. That is not the case in Pennsylvania, which I knew that. There are some places like Canada does this really, really well. But here we don't at all. It's just one of those places that there's not good treatment, there's not good care, there's not good, it's just a disaster, which is devastating in and of itself. So anyone can petition a 302, especially a police officer. So I say to him, listen, I said, I'm dealing with a chronic cancer. I'm really not feeling well. I need to go home. I need to take care of myself. I've shared with you all the information that I have, and I need you guys to kind of take it from here. And I said, you have my number. You can call me if you need anything, etc. So I'm on my way home, and I get a call, and it's him, and he says, I need you to come to the hospital. And in that moment, I was so aggravated because, being a helper is hard, and I was trying to have boundaries around it. And essentially he was doing things that people have done to me my whole life, which is like, we don't care about your boundary. We don't care how you feel. I don't want to do this. So it doesn't matter how you feel. I need you to do this. And so the thing is, in the moment, I didn't want to get stuck on my anger for that officer. I wanted to continue my empathetic kindness and advocacy for the young man, because ultimately what would have happened if I didn't go is they would have just released him and he would have been in the same position, which I know people listening to this think, how is that possible? And that is what upset me so much about the situation. Where I live, they would have just let him back out on the street, and we would have been in the same position. So in this moment, I thought, well, I either can abide by my boundary and this young man doesn't get the help he needs, or I can, suck it up. I can go and do what I need to do for him, which is ultimately, of course, what I decided to do. Because for me, I am fiercely protective of people who cannot care for themselves or protect themselves. I think they are the most marginalized and vulnerable populations that we have. And so, and they deserve so much love and respect, and they don't get it. So I thought, well, okay, this is going to be my loving gesture to him, even though it doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't feel good to have to involuntarily hospitalize someone. That sucks. But, it was just apparent that he needed that. So I drive a half hour to the hospital. Also, the thing that royally pissed me off is that I shared with this officer that I have a chronic cancer and I've been on treatment for years, blah, blah, blah. And so where am I waiting for the officer? I'm in the ER, literally the worst place for me on the planet. So of course I mask. I always have my mask with me. I cannot count on anyone other than me to protect myself. So I mask, but I'm wildly uncomfortable, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it. And eventually that officer comes and he says, okay, so I'm going to need you to do this, this, and this. And I said, well, are you going to be helping me with any of it? And he says, no. And he walked away. And I thought, perfect. Okay, great. So I go to petition, which the last thing I'm going to say about this is that to fill out a petition for a 302, it's not complicated, but you have to write. And one of my major issues when I'm not feeling well is I have arthritis, and my right hand was so swollen that it was almost hard for me to use. And of course, I'm right-handed. So that was the other thing that I was just like, this person has literally does not care about me, does not care about this kid. That's just who this person is, and that sucks. But what am I going to do? So I'm like writing with my like arthritic hand. I'm just like trying to because it has to be legible. Otherwise you're not going to get it approved. So I fill out the petition. I work with a crisis counselor. We call the delegate for the county, and then they finally agree to hospitalization for this gentleman. So I'm elated about that because at least for me, I know that he's going to be safe. He's going to be warm. He's going to be fed. And hopefully he's going to get the psychiatric help and treatment that he needs, at least temporarily. Because here in Pennsylvania, 302, it's really only 72 hours. And then what can happen is after that, if a longer commitment is needed, then the doctor and the hospital do what's called a 303 hearing to extend someone's hospitalization. I was assured that I would get a call letting me know what was going on. Of course, at this point, I have not. So all I can do is just hope that he is safe and sound and he's getting the help and care that he needs. So essentially, that's the story. Now, after I got home, I felt intense despair and sadness. And, some people, like I talked to my husband, I talked to some of my best friends, and they were like, wow, we're so proud of you. How amazing. But it didn't feel amazing at all. And I'm going to tell you why. Because watching the institutional failures and the institutional gaps for people who, A, have severe mental health issues, B, specifically for people of color who have specific mental health issues, because there is a huge disparity in how people with low functioning like mental health issues plus add into being a person of color, there is a huge disparity in treatment, which makes me feel awful because it is so enraging to me, because I just see I see the heart, I see the person, I see someone who needs help, and I just can't imagine seeing someone treated with such like systematic dehumanization. And it just really messed with my head. I'm going to be honest. I cried. I was so upset. I was just like thinking about the type of life that this person was going to lead. And an interesting side note is while I was petitioning the 302, trying to write as quick as I can to get it approved, there were nurses, and I was listening to the crisis counselor was talking to some of the nurses at this hospital, and one of the nurses was saying he needs to go. They were just trying to get him out of there because they were annoyed by him. And that also really aggravated me. I know my mom is a nurse. There are some nurses who are amazing human beings that are angels on earth. And then there are some people who it's like, why are you doing this? Because you clearly hate people. I mean, seriously. And I'm a professional patient. So I've had experiences with some doctors and nurses who are the most amazing. And I have some terrible experiences. And of course, some, mediocre, whatever. People are human. But I'm talking about the extremes. And so they just wanted to shoo this guy out. And I'm just like, what is with the world? Like, what is happening? So for me, I talk to my own Bish therapist because, for me, I am very triggered by injustice and, marginalized communities being treated poorly and all of these things. These are just my triggers. I feel very strongly about them. And so my therapist, she gets it. She understands me. She has some of those feelings as well. So talking to her really helped me understand what was so upsetting about it to me, because here's a good lesson. I'm great at what I do, but I need someone to help me too, because sometimes when you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. And I'm smart and I'm insightful, but like, I need her to be like, oh, here's what I'm seeing. So for anyone, just to destigmatize further, mental health and treatment, I'm on psychotropic medications. You can be a good helper and need help. We all need help. Like, that's just part of the human condition. So the one thing my therapist and I really talked about is how I need to tell this story on my platform, now that I do have a platform, to destigmatize mental health, and also to talk about how we can be the light, how we can be advocates for people. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So, as I mentioned, one of the major pieces of stigma I wanted to kind of bust through is that people with psychosis aren't aren't typically aggressive. They can be if they are cornered, or if they're doing something where if people are doing something to them that they feel unsafe, well, sure. But I think that's just the important message, is they're human beings and they have a physiological issue that they need assistance with. So no, I wasn't scared. No, I don't think we need to be scared. Um, you know, that's my message. We must be advocates to marginalized group because they really do need us. They need people like me and like us to, advocate for them, because that gentleman was not able to advocate for himself, and people are so quick to dispose of people like that, which makes me insane. So here's what I want to say about how we can help. I had some listeners ask some great questions about, do you recommend a non-professional do what you do in this situation? And so the answer is, it's complicated. It's very nuanced, but here is what I will say. You have to help with two things: self-awareness and boundaries. Okay. All people have to help with self-awareness and boundaries. I'm going to give you an example. I was in Michigan for a wedding over the summer, and the town that we were in, there was a unhoused population that I became aware of the couple days that we were there. So I was walking down the street. I was by myself. It was at night. I had forgotten something in the car, and I was going to meet my husband and some people, and the car was just down the street. So I come across this gentleman who was clearly intoxicated, um, under the influence of some substance or alcohol, but I would guess to say he was drunk, and he was kind of laying, and half of his clothes were off and things like that. So for me, um, I have a little bit of fear around people who are really intoxicated, and the reason for that is multi. I have many reasons for that, but the biggest reason is one thing I learned working in an inpatient rehab, is that trying to talk to somebody using rational logic when they're intoxicated, it's like trying to herd cats. It's useless. It's futile. It's not going to happen. You're not going to, get through to someone who's like super intoxicated. So I knew that for me, I was alone. It was at night. And to me, when someone is intoxicated, they are definitely unpredictable. So what I did was I went into the hotel and I told the person at the desk there was a gentleman outside, appeared to be intoxicated, and he said, "Okay, I know." And he said, "I'm going to go out and I'm going to take care of it." So this is a good example of always help, always do something to help, but you don't have to do what I did if it doesn't feel right for you. If it doesn't feel like, if you're like, I feel scared, or this doesn't make sense for me, I feel uncomfortable, I don't know that this is how I can best help, no problem. If you see, here is what the main problem was with this kid, is that, and he was a young kid, by the way, I won't say his age, but he was young. um, there were people while this kid was walking that were just driving by, driving by, driving by. And in fact, what royally pissed me off is that when I pulled my car over to help this young man, I was a little bit in the road, and I just mean a little bit, and people honked at me. So people honked at me while I like screw you, lady, get your car out of the way while I'm trying to help this, right? So this is the kind of stuff that really enrages me. Not a one person stopped. Not one person offered to help. And so my message is, if you see something, call 911. Number one. Number two, uh, keep in mind, I have people who listen and watch this from all over the globe. So people from different countries and things like that. So your mental health and first responder situation is going to be different. So I can't exactly tell you what to do, but what I will say is if you see something, you got to say something. I mean, it really is true. At least do your part to, whether it's calling, emergency services, mental health services, whatever it is where you live, just call, just make a call, just do something. If pulling over doesn't feel safe or it doesn't feel right to you, no problem. And I can't recommend everyone do that either. But for me, I just knew it was the right decision. So the other thing is when you're looking to advocate or help for someone, listen to your gut about what's right for you, right? So you don't have to do what I do to be helpful. You could call, because to me, if more people would have called 911 about this gentleman, they would have had to do something about it. I got the sense that they maybe got a couple of calls, but the type of call you give makes all the difference. If people called and they were like, there's this kid and he's, being a nuisance, well, they, it may not have been, you may not have been as aware that he actually needed some help. So it's what you say and how you say it as well. Um, so I think that you just got to honor your boundaries. You got to listen to yourself. You got to honor your boundaries. You got to listen to that, because we can't help people at the cost of ourselves. And this is one rare situation where I did sacrifice a little bit of myself to help him, but I'm okay with that. I'm not going to recommend everybody do that, but for me, I couldn't have lived with myself if I hadn't. I couldn't have slept at night. For me, I am an extremely sensitive soul. I'm an empath. I can feel people's pain. I see into their soul. It's a gift, and sometimes it feels like a curse. And in this situation, it did feel like a curse, because I had a couple of days where I was just so emotionally spent from this situation and looking at the institutional, failures and things like that. But here are some things that we can do, because I couldn't get, it was okay for me to sit in that space for a couple days, but you can't stay in that space, because that's how resentment and anger and helplessness comes full force. So here, when we want to ask what can we do, here are some things we can do. We can donate to reputable charities. Okay. There's a website I recommend called Charity Navigator. Charity Navigator, Google them, look at what they're all about. But what they do is they vet certain charities, so it's a legitimate one. They rank them, and there's ratings and all these things, so that and you can go and you can type in anything. You can type in mental health. You can type in Ukraine. You can type in whatever. And that will take you to charities to help that specific thing. Okay. Now I understand finances can be tight, especially this time of year. So if donating doesn't work for you, then something else I can recommend is volunteering in your community, whether it's a local, soup kitchen, Salvation Army, domestic violence home, whatever it is. And when I say volunteer your time, I don't mean, you know, all like do an hour, a couple hours a month or whatever. If that is something that you think would help you feel good about being a helper. And here's the thing, if those don't work, being an advocate and a support and a helper really is about, to me, the day-to-day stuff. So if none of those work for you, then on World Kindness Day, my message is just be the light that you want to see. So, for example, when I'm having a hard day and I don't feel well, I go out and I don't take that out on people. I am kind. If I see someone struggling, I'll, in a store and they're like in the weeds, I'm like, hey, you're doing a great job. It sounds so silly, but I think it's just the humanity for me sometimes that's missing, that can be really bothersome. And that's not hard to do. It doesn't cost money. It doesn't take a lot of time. Holding the door for people, saying hello, being kind. If someone drops something, picking it up, whatever, just remembering our humanity. That's what we can do. So I hope this has been helpful. Because the truth of the matter is that being an empathetic witness, it does require self-assessment and self-care. Even for people like me who've done it professionally, this would have eaten me alive if I didn't do some of the work that I did to process this and to move forward, right? I could have really got stuck in the sunken place and, the darkness of it, but I'm going to use my platform to share the story and, have everyone hear it. And then, it's like a ripple effect. And then you'll hear this and you do the things that you do because you're all wonderful people. So that's what I'm going to say about it. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. If you have any questions, follow-up questions, concerns, please, DM me on Instagram, Your Bish Therapist. You can also email me at yourbishtherapist@gmail.com. And I am also on TikTok. I am also on Facebook, and you can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you would subscribe to my YouTube or subscribe to the podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. The more, listens and streams I get, the more often I can, do this. So, which is, my goal. So thank you all for listening. Happy World Kindness Day. And, of course, let's remember to take care of ourselves and each other and to be the light in the world that we want to see. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking about twin flames next time. Disclaimer: posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. This podcast, my opinions and posts are my own and are not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.